I had spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen, hands aching, knees sore, preparing a red pepper sea-based dish for my daughter-in-law Sophie. She had been craving something spicy, or so she said. I had traveled 7 bus stops across town to find the freshest catch, just to please her. I used to think this was what family meant: sacrifice, patience, and service. But as I placed the food on the table, Sophie didn't even look up from her phone. She took one bite, wrinkled her nose, then slammed her fork down. "This is disgusting," she said. "Didn't I tell you I wanted it mild? Are your ears just for decoration?" I tried to explain. "That's how the dish is made," you said. Before I could finish, she stood up. Her voice rose. "You're so bloody useless." And then, just like that, her hand lashed across my face. It was not a weak slap. Sophie used to be a fitness coach. Even 3 months pregnant, her strength had not faded. My cheek burned. I stumbled sideways, hit the edge of the table, and fell hard onto the kitchen tiles. The pain was sharp and cold, like a crack of lightning up my back. She froze. I could see the panic in her eyes. Then she turned towards the sofa. "Daniel," she cried. "It was an accident. My son didn't even come to me." He dropped his game controller and ran straight to her. "It's all right, love. I've got you. I won't let anything hurt you." Not once did he look at me. Not even when I was gasping on the floor. A few moments later, Jeffrey walked in. My husband. He glanced at me lying there and scowled. "What now, Margaret? You tripped over your own feet again." They all stood there, my son, my husband, and Sophie, like I was some nuisance in their perfect little household. I pointed a trembling finger at her. "She hit me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mum, don't make this a big deal. She's hormonal. She just lost it for a second." Jeffrey let out a laugh. "For God's sake, Margaret. She's carrying our grandchild. You're here to help, not to create drama." Then he looked at Sophie, gently, as if she were a fragile doll. "Next time, sweetheart, try not to use your hands. You could hurt the baby." Sophie gave a little smirk. The kind of smirk that tells you she knows she's won. I lay on the floor, bones aching, heart cracked. 30 years of marriage. A lifetime of sacrifices. And they treated me like a broken appliance. Daniel put his arm around Sophie, as if nothing had happened. "Told you she was fine," he said. "She's just being dramatic." Jeffrey slapped the table. "Is dinner ready or not? We're starving." I stood up slowly, using the edge of the table to balance myself. My entire body trembled, but not just from the fall. Something inside me had started to boil. I looked at the sea base, at the dinner I had made with care, and I flipped the table. Plates crashed. Sauce splattered. They froze in disbelief. I pulled out my phone. "I've called the police." Their faces dropped. Jeffrey slammed the table again. "Have you gone mad? You've ruined dinner and now you're calling the police. What will the neighbors say?" Daniel panicked. "Mum, stop it. It was just a slap. Just a slap." I sat down on the couch, cradling my head as it throbbed. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed with the sound of beeping machines and the stench of antiseptic thick in the air. The light above flickered slightly. My head ached, and every movement sent a reminder of the cold tiles and Sophie's slap. I blinked, confused at first, until a nurse leaned over me and said gently, "You took a nasty fall, Mrs. Langford. The police brought you in." Mrs. Langford. I hadn't heard anyone say my name with kindness in years. No one was sitting beside me. No flowers. No family. Only my handbag on the chair and my coat folded sloppily by my feet. The nurse smiled. You've been here overnight. You'll be discharged soon. I waited. Perhaps Daniel would come. Perhaps even Jeffrey. I clung to the edge of hope like a fool. Hours passed. The silence in the room began to ring in my ears louder than the machines. By late afternoon, a policeman appeared. A young officer, too polished, too polite. We spoke with your family, he said. They mentioned you had a dizzy spell and collapsed. I stared at him. A dizzy spell? I asked. He hesitated. They denied any physical altercation. There were conflicting accounts. No witnesses willing to confirm. I knew what that meant. They lied. He handed me a card. If you'd like to pursue it, you'll need to provide a statement. I nodded, but my hands stayed still. He left. And again, I was alone. That evening, Jeffrey finally arrived. He didn't hug me. He didn't sit. Just stood near the window, arms crossed, tapping his foot. You really called the police, Margaret? Over a slap. She's carrying our grandchild. And you humiliated the family. She assaulted me, I said quietly. He scoffed. It was a moment of emotion. Do you even hear yourself? You made a scene, collapsed like a martyr, and now the neighbors are gossiping. I looked at him. I mean truly looked. The lines around his mouth. The hard eyes. 30 years and he had never stood between me and harm. Not once. She could have broken my cheekbone, I whispered. He rolled his eyes. You always were dramatic. Let's go. I've had enough of hospitals. At home, I noticed something strange. My bedroom, our bedroom, had been moved. My clothes packed in black bin bags, dumped at the bottom of the stairs. My shoes piled like junk. The room was now painted a soft pink, with a crib, a changing table, and a banner that read Welcome Baby Langford. Sophie walked by, not even pretending to feel guilty. We needed the space, she said. You can take the guest room. The guest room had no proper bed. Just a stiff pull-out mattress, and a light that buzzed like a wasp in your ear. No one offered help. No one apologized. That night, lying alone under a thin blanket, I stared at the ceiling and thought of everything I had given. The money I lent them for their wedding. The weekends spent babysitting their dog. The meals, the laundry, the garden I had planted with my own hands. And in return, I got slapped, dismissed, and shoved into a guest room like a burden. I pressed my hand against my cheek. Still tender. The silence of that night spoke louder than anything they'd said. And somewhere deep inside, a seed had begun to grow. The days that followed blurred into a grey routine. I moved silently around the house like a ghost. Every sound felt foreign. Every glance I received was laced with irritation. Sophie's bump grew rounder by the day, and with it, her entitlement. She barked orders from the living room, feet propped on cushions I had sewn myself. Jeffrey fetched her tea and rubbed her swollen ankles like a doting servant. And me? I was an afterthought. A presence to be tolerated. Someone to keep the kettle warm and the floor clean. One morning, I found her in the kitchen, rummaging through my recipe book, the one passed down from my mother, with handwritten notes in fading ink. I thought I'd throw out the ones that are too old-fashioned, she said breezily. No one makes suet pudding anymore. I took the book from her hands. My voice trembled. Please don't touch this. She raised her eyebrows. It's just a book. It's mine, I said, barely louder than a whisper. She shrugged. It's our house now. You're just staying. Just staying. That phrase clung to me all day. At dinner, they made plans. Loudly. Openly. Daniel wanted to knock through the wall to make space for a nursery. Jeffrey thought the garden could be re-landscaped. Sophie wanted the dining room painted yellow. I sat there, eating soup I had made with my own hands, and realized no one had asked what I thought. No one even remembered that it was my house once. That night, I stood in the hallway, staring at the family portraits on the wall. Daniel's graduation. Our wedding. The family Christmas in Devon. Quietly, I took down one frame. The glass was cold under my fingers. It was a photo of me holding Daniel as a baby, his face pressed to my neck. I carried it to the guest room and placed it on the windowsill. A reminder to myself that I had lived here long before Sophie's scented candles and Jeffrey's dismissive silence. That I mattered once. The next day, the photo was gone. Replaced with a ceramic owl. I said nothing. I simply opened my laptop and searched for something I hadn't dared to look up in years. An estate agent. Valuation services. Property rights. And as I read through the details, the lines between fear and fire inside me began to blur. They had tried to erase me. But I was still here. It started with a knock on the door. Not the front door, the one to the guest room. Sophie's voice came muffled through the wood. "Mum? Can we talk?" I said nothing. A few moments passed. The handle turned, but I had locked it. She sighed, sharp and irritated, then walked away. Later that evening, Daniel arrived home. His footsteps were heavy, his greeting absent. At dinner, he cleared his throat. "Mum, I've spoken to Jeffrey. He thinks it's time we discuss the arrangement here." "The arrangement?" I asked, folding my napkin carefully. "Well," he began, glancing at Sophie, "the baby's due soon, and it's going to get crowded. Jeffrey's offered to let you stay at his parents' place for a few weeks." I looked between them. Sophie sipped her water like she wasn't listening. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. "I see," I said, softly. Jeffrey chimed in. "It's not permanent. Just until things settle. You'd be more comfortable there." More comfortable. That phrase again, dressed up in false kindness. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, steady and clear. Sophie snorted. "This isn't about you. We need space for the baby." "This is my house," I replied. A silence fell over the table like a shroud. Daniel sat back. "Mum, please don't make this harder than it is." I stood up. Harder for whom? The next morning, I brewed tea and waited until they were all downstairs. I set the tray in the middle of the table and laid down a small envelope beside it. "What's this?" Sophie asked, eyeing it like it might bite. "A letter," I replied, "from my solicitor." Jeffrey laughed, uncertain. "A solicitor? What for?" "For boundaries," I said. "You've made it clear how unwelcome I am in my own home. So now, things will be on paper." They stared, confused. I poured tea for myself and didn't offer any to them. The house was left to me outright when Harold passed. Not to Daniel, not jointly. Me. "You wouldn't," Daniel said, voice cracking. "I would. I already have." The letter detailed a formal tenancy agreement. They could stay 6 months, rent-free, but after that, terms would apply. Any breach, and the offer would be withdrawn. "You're throwing your own son out?" he asked, stunned. "No," I said, calmly. "I'm offering you a choice." Sophie stood up, hands on hips. "You're bluffing." I looked her in the eyes. "Try me." She didn't respond. Just turned on her heel and stormed off. Daniel followed, his voice low and pleading behind her. I sat alone, sipping my tea, feeling not triumphant but anchored. The house no longer echoed with their plans. For the first time in years, I'd spoken in a language they understood. Paper. Boundaries. Consequences. For days, they barely spoke to me. Mornings were stiff with silence. The kitchen became a battleground of glances and avoided steps. Daniel left early, often without breakfast. Sophie sulked through the house like a thundercloud. Jeffrey, once so smug, now looked unsure, his voice quieter than ever. I didn't chase them. I didn't ask for peace. I simply continued. Every morning, I woke up early, made my own tea, took walks around the garden, and cleaned the rooms they never entered. It was quiet, yes, but it was my quiet. Until one morning, when I came downstairs to find the dining table covered in boxes. What's all this? I asked. Daniel didn't look up. We're moving out. Sophie chimed in from the stairwell. Finally. We found a place. I looked at Jeffrey. He nodded, sheepishly. We'll be out by next week, Daniel said, closing a box with too much force. Do you need help with the van? I asked. Sophie scoffed. No thanks. You've done enough. The words were meant to sting, but they fell flat. I only nodded and walked back to the kitchen. That night, Jeffrey knocked on my door. For once, alone. I just wanted to say, he hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. No one ever does, I replied. He lingered. Sophie can be intense. But she's not all bad. She just wants what's best for the baby. And I said softly, want what's best for myself. He nodded, reluctantly, then left without another word. Their moving day came faster than I expected. The hallway filled with bags and noise. Sophie barked orders. Daniel looked pale. Did you get the baby monitor? She asked, frantically. Already packed. Jeffrey shouted from the car. It should have felt like relief. But it didn't, not yet. As the last box disappeared through the front door, Daniel turned back. His eyes landed on me, not quite angry, not quite soft. You really meant it, he said. Yes, I answered. You actually chose this. I did. He held my gaze for a moment, then turned and left. The door closed behind them with a finality I hadn't expected. The house, at last, was quiet. Not angry quiet. Not sulking quiet. Just quiet. I went to the living room and sat in Harold's old armchair. The cushions had sunk a little over the years, but the shape of it still held me like memory. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was intruding. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after they moved out, I found an envelope slipped through the letterbox. No stamp. Just my name in Daniel's handwriting, uneven and slightly rushed. I didn't open it right away. I placed it on the mantel and left it there, next to the clock Harold once wound every Sunday. I cleaned the kitchen. I watered the garden. I made myself a proper lunch. And then, when the sky turned a hazy grey, I finally sat down with the letter. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper. Nothing formal. No apology. Just a single paragraph. Mum. I know you're angry. Maybe you should be. I can't undo what happened. But I hope one day we can still talk. I miss Sunday dinners. Daniel. No signature. No mention of Sophie. No mention of the slap, the silence, or the shame. I read it twice. Then folded it back and returned it to the envelope. That night, I slept deeply. And in the morning, I posted my own letter. It wasn't much. Just one line. I am not a ghost. You don't get to haunt me. I didn't sign it either. Weeks passed. The garden bloomed more than ever. I painted the conservatory windows, scrubbed every tile in the bathroom, and even replaced the kettle with one that didn't squeal. And then, one afternoon, Cooper arrived again. "Got your message," he said, smiling as he hoisted a canvas bag onto the kitchen counter. "I brought tea and biscuits. Thought you might need company." I smiled. "You're just in time. I was going to show you something." I led him to the study. The room Harold had once used for his war books and radio parts. Now, it was something else entirely. Against the wall stood a small easel. On it, a rough sketch, pencil outlines of a cottage garden, a stone path, and a woman in a wide-brimmed hat standing beneath a pear tree. "Started it yesterday," I said, a little shy. "I thought it might be nice to learn." Cooper grinned. "It's brilliant." "You're brilliant." I didn't say anything. But I felt it. Later that evening, as he left, he turned at the door. "By the way, you should see what's in the post." He pointed at the front table. Another letter. This one neater. In Sophie's handwriting. I didn't pick it up right away. I waited until the next morning, brewed a fresh cup of Earl Grey, and sat by the window with the envelope in hand. It was heavier than the last. I opened it slowly. Inside, a folded page and a photograph. The photo was of Sophie, holding the baby. A boy. Pink-cheeked and swaddled in pale blue. Her smile looked genuine, but tired. Her eyes were softer than I remembered. The letter began simply. "Evelyn. You probably don't want to hear from me. But I wanted you to know. I had the baby. His name is Oliver." No grand apology. No excuses. But further down, something else. "I don't know what kind of mother I'll be. But I know what kind of mother you are. And if you ever wanted to meet him, I'd understand. If not, I'll understand that too." My fingers trembled just slightly. I didn't cry. I placed the letter beside the kettle, and the photograph on the windowsill. Then I stood, and went back to my painting. The pear tree needed more leaves. It was mid-April when they came. The front gate creaked open early one Saturday, just as I was trimming the lavender bushes. I looked up to see Daniel standing awkwardly at the end of the path, holding the baby carrier like it was made of glass. Sophie stood just behind him, arms folded tightly, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. I didn't speak. I didn't move. Daniel raised a hand, not quite a wave. We were nearby. I stepped aside without a word and left the garden gate open. Inside, the house was filled with the faint scent of lemon polish and warm scones. The kind of comfort I used to offer every Sunday without thinking. Now, it felt like a stranger's home, despite being mine. Daniel placed the baby carrier on the sitting room floor. I didn't look at the baby. Not yet. Sophie sat on the edge of the armchair, stiff-backed, her knees tight together. She took off her sunglasses and set them down on the coffee table. Her eyes were puffy, her lashes darkened by tears. I cleared my throat. "Tea?" Daniel nodded. "Please." In the kitchen, I moved automatically. Teapot, cups, milk, sugar. The rhythm felt both familiar and foreign. Back in the sitting room, I poured quietly while they murmured polite thanks. Still, I didn't look at the baby. It wasn't fear that held me back. It was something quieter. Like grief that had yet to take shape. Then Sophie did something I didn't expect. She stood, walked over to the carrier, and lifted Oliver out gently. She cradled him for a moment, whispered something into his ear, then crossed the room. And handed him to me. The moment he was in my arms, time seemed to twist. He smelled of talcum and something new, something hopeful. He was heavier than I thought he'd be. His face was round and calm, with Harold's chin and, oddly, my mother's eyes. I didn't say a word. I just held him. His small hand opened, then closed around the collar of my jumper. He likes warmth, Sophie said quietly. He falls asleep faster that way. Daniel watched us, his eyes full of something he hadn't shown me in years, uncertainty. I didn't bring you flowers, he said. I didn't think you'd want them. I looked up then. No. Not yet. Oliver made a soft gurgling sound and nestled into my chest. We sat like that for a long while. Not talking. Just sitting. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. When they left, Sophie kissed my cheek. Her touch was light, unsure. Daniel hugged me. Not tightly. But not distantly, either. I stood on the doorstep long after they'd gone, Oliver's scent still lingering on my jumper. Inside, the baby blanket they'd forgotten remained on the armchair. I didn't call after them. I folded it gently and placed it in the drawer beneath the window seat. It belonged there now. The room was quiet when they arrived. Afternoon light filtered through the garden windows, casting golden lines across the floor. Cooper sat beside me, arms folded, legs crossed, calm as ever. On the low table lay 2 identical brown envelopes. They were late, of course. Jacob entered first, his shoes clacking loudly on the wooden floor like a declaration of entitlement. Daniel trailed behind, his face pale, a flicker of hesitation in his steps. Sophie wasn't with them. Right then, Jacob said, clapping his hands once. Let's get this over with. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Cooper handed them each an envelope, then sat back. The silence was loud. I watched them both open the papers slowly, their eyes moving across the page with increasing speed. It didn't take long for the color to drain from Jacob's face. What the hell is this? Daniel stared at his own copy, then at me. You rewrote your will? I nodded once. Calm. Certain. Jacob was louder. You left the house. The money. All of it, gone. And what is this nonsense? A donation to a women's shelter. A garden project. Have you lost your mind? No, I said quietly. I've just found it. Daniel's voice was tight. You cut us out. I gave what I had to who deserved it, I replied. Cooper. Jacob scoffed. You're giving everything to a nephew who just showed up after all these years. I looked at Cooper. His steady presence, his quiet loyalty. He didn't show up. He stayed. They didn't speak for a moment. I stood up, slowly. You see, for years I gave everything, my time, my hands, my breath, for this family. For people who only noticed when I stopped. Daniel looked at the papers again. But I'm your son. You were, I said. When you chose to watch instead of stand up for me, that changed. Jacob stepped forward, voice harsh. You think you can just erase us? No, I said calmly. But I can finally choose myself. He sneered. No court will let this stand. I'll fight it. You're welcome to try, I said, walking to the door and opening it. But you won't win. Cooper rose beside me. Daniel hesitated. His face was softer now, almost broken. Mum, he said quietly. Is there no way back? I looked at him long and hard. No, Daniel. That door closed the moment you let her hit me, and turned away. They left, eventually. Not with rage. With silence. Outside, the sun had begun to dip below the rooftops. The air was sweet with the scent of lavender. I stood there, one hand on the frame, watching them walk away, smaller with each step, until they disappeared around the corner. Cooper placed a hand on my shoulder. You did it. I didn't answer. Not right away. Because it wasn't about victory. It was about air. The kind you can breathe without explanation. without shame, without bruises. And that day, I finally had it.